we're apparently sending warships off the coast of Venezuela.
Yes.
Okay, Anna.
This I think is not great. So let's go over what is happening with Venezuela. So in a major escalation by the Trump administration, Trump has decided to deploy U.S. warships near the coast of Venezuela. Now, before I go any further, I just have to give you a little more context, because during Trump's first term, one of the things that he tried to do multiple times but failed at was essentially overthrow the leader of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, and install a preferred leader of Venezuela, Juan Guaido. Now, that didn't work. And so I think that that's part of the reason why Trump is doing what he's doing, but there's more to it than that. So while President Trump claims he's doing this to stop the flow of drugs to the United States, that might actually just be a cover story. Watch this video.
The Trump administration is cracking down on drug cartels at sea. A source briefed on the matter tells NBC News the U.S. is planning to deploy these 3 warships near Venezuela. President Trump focusing on drugs coming to the coasts after reducing illegal border crossings to record lows.
They continue to send drugs into our country, Venezuela. Yeah, they've been very nasty.
The Trump administration also recently doubling to $50 million its reward for the arrest of Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro, saying he violated U.S. drug laws.
Okay, so Trump has had issues with Maduro, has tried to overthrow Maduro multiple times, failed at it. Now, he issued a secret directive calling on the military to use force against Latin American drug cartels, including a Venezuelan group called the Cartel de los Soles. And as a result, 3 destroyers and an amphibious squadron with about 4,000 U.S. Marines were dispatched to the Caribbean Sea close to Venezuelan waters. The White House said this week in an act they said was intended to stop drug cartel activity. I actually don't believe him when it comes to drug cartel activity. I think that there's more to it than that. Now, there is cocaine coming from Venezuela. They are not big in the fentanyl trade, even though the Trump administration keeps citing fentanyl as their reason for doing this. Now, Maduro has responded by deploying 4.5 million militiamen. Important to note that these are the individuals who are the least prepared to go into war or combat. So this was really like a symbolic gesture to show, like, I'm not going to back down if you actually do threaten to hit us militarily. They're mostly made up of volunteers and, again, are not battle ready as other branches of the Venezuelan military are. So while all of this is happening, Trump is repeatedly calling Nicolás Maduro an illegitimate leader, which hints at another attempt at regime change. More on that in a minute. Officials in Venezuela called the action a threat to their sovereignty, and even China has weighed in on this because China is part of this big story. Okay, why? Yeah. Well, China's reliant on Venezuela for its oil. And so part of the reason why Trump is doing this is likely to undercut China as well. Let me go to the next graphic. I believe that Trump's main purpose in doing this is to politically suppress the left-wing president Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela and force him to step down. And that's according to a Latin American expert at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Trump has also imposed a 25% tariff on third countries that buy Venezuelan oil because he wants to discourage third countries from buying oil from Venezuela. The U.S. had stopped importing oil from Venezuela between 2019 to 2023. But interestingly enough, they actually started importing again due to rising oil prices on the global market. So as far as I know, and I looked into this, the U.S. is still, like importing oil from Venezuela, which is kind of hilarious given how adversarial our relationship at the moment is with Venezuela. American energy multinational Chevron has been reauthorized to operate there as Trump hopes to increase fossil fuel usage at home. Venezuela shipped 4.1 million barrels of oil to the United States in May. So we're relying on their oil while Trump is threatening other countries with 25% tariffs if they import oil from Venezuela. So, getting back to the question about China. So a professor of economics at Willamette University in the US says that the US may be acting now because it wants control over Venezuelan oil production to weaken the country's economic influence. Now, I don't think Venezuela really has much influence on a global scale, but I do really worry about the fact that if you're trying to prevent other countries from importing oil from Venezuela, well, that again lowers the amount of oil on the global market. The way oil is traded on the global market is through something known as OPEC. OPEC are oil producing countries. And I remember there was this big scandal when Saudi Arabia, not too long ago, was intentionally lessening their oil production so there would be a shortage that would allow for the cost of oil to spike. That was actually one of the big reasons why there was inflation, not just in the United States, but across the globe. And so one of the reasons why we allowed for the import of Venezuelan oil again was in order to balance out the damage that was being done by Saudi Arabia. I don't see this military buildup off the coast of Venezuela as an effort to stop the drug trade. I think that there are other geopolitical agenda items for the Trump administration, including undercutting China and potentially overthrowing Nicolás Maduro while taking some control over Venezuela's oil supply. That's the way I kind of see this shaping up.
Big question though, Anna, is do you see it backfiring? Because quite honestly, the way you describe it, it's like, well, I mean, it's obviously about oil. I think we all figured that. And the way you describe it, it's 4D chess and geopolitical power and everybody's playing and this is our move. And it makes sense, to be dead honest. But then the question is, does it play out or is it another forever war and you simply push them further into the arms of China? Like what's
so that's the thing. Some of the activity from the United States, especially under Trump, has driven our not necessarily adversaries, but countries we're not as friendly with closer together, right? And so if you guys could remember that segment we did a few weeks ago on the BRICS nations. Yeah, exactly. And their efforts to devalue the dollar, the fact that they were able to build this alliance and then build an international banking system that bypasses any of the sanctions that we could implement on any country, including Russia. So they don't need SWIFT anymore. They have their own international banking system. They're working to devalue the dollar. So yeah, there's definitely an opportunity here, or a possibility, I should say, for this type of policy to backfire. I think that we should be, if we're worried about the price of oil, if we're worried about inflation, whether you like it or not, you should try to strike a more diplomatic relationship with oil producing countries. That way, they're not trying to manipulate the market. You shouldn't try to prevent Venezuela from exporting oil to other countries, because when you do that, those other countries are going to look for oil elsewhere on the international market, and it limits the supply. It makes the cost of energy go up significantly. So I am worried about that, and I think that is a possibility here.
And that's a really interesting point. Now, I do want to put it into extremely important context, because you mentioned BRICS. And another reason why Trump is doubling down on this is, guess what? One word: Ukraine. Because Venezuela has very close ties with Russia, and Venezuela is Russia's foothold in South America. So that's something that we cannot overlook. Trump is now placing secondary tariffs on countries like China and India and Venezuela in order to hold Putin's feet to the fire. And that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of economic measure that J.D. Vance cited on Meet the Press yesterday when he said he was going to tighten the screws if Putin isn't serious about coming to the table in peace. So I think this is part of a larger chessboard, and it's not just about fentanyl or cocaine or immigration, even though a huge part of that is, and that's why we saw 238 Venezuelan nationals deported from the United States just last month. This is definitely about those domestic issues, but it's also about these geopolitical factors. He's trying to pressure Russia.
Kelsey, what do you think?
I mean, it feels like a regime change waiting to happen while our people sit on the border. It just feels like not only 3D, 4D chess, it feels like a lot of people have been fed this information for an extended period of time about all the wars that we continually put ourselves in. And now people are waking up to the idea that if you're saying this, it's actually for sure going to be this. And it's not a drug issue. This has always been about oil. I do struggle, though, when Trump does things like this, where he says, you can't do this, but we can do this. He wants his cake and he wants to eat it too. That kind of rubs me the wrong way. Again, this comes down to whether, like you said, Lindy, there's tariffs for sure. But now tell me, how much does it cost to run a United States Navy ship and all the people on it, and how many and how long? So I'm just wondering, how many more do we have to give? How much more do we have to give over a lie that is over oil? It's nothing to do with drugs. Drugs have always been the issue, but the bigger problem we're going to see here is the continued push into Russia. You are sending Venezuela right into the arms of Putin and right into the arms of China, which will only end up striking them. And to take it further, other Latin American leaders have spoken out against this, whether it's Brazil or Mexico as well. They feel it is a threat. And when you start using the words, especially from a president like Trump, saying illegitimate government, all that screams to me is we are about to wipe you out and put in a new regime. One that will play ball with us, play ball with Russia and with China, but in a way that we dictate the rules and the way that we want the oil to be sent. And we want a piece of it.
Kelsey, you said something really interesting about how when America does it, it's fine, but no one else can do it. Well, that goes back to thousands of years of history. Do you guys remember the Melian dialogue, which basically says might makes right? If you're strong, you can do it. If you're weak, you can't. And that's 100%. Just the way that American hegemony has been for the 250 years that we've been in existence. We don't care.
Right.
Because my question that's just a realpolitik way of doing things there.
For sure. Here's the thing. Well, you have bad guys out there. China, not awesome. Russia, not awesome.
Not awesome.
If this is the game that we're playing to try to maintain dominance over them, I don't have a problem with the motive, believe it or not. I'm simply questioning the strategy. And It's like, Anna, you bring up it could go very far south. Kelsey, you bring up it could go very far south. That's the part that worries me a little bit. And mine's far greater than mine. God willing, have had far more experience in playing these kinds of reindeer games. Hopefully know what they're doing, because it certainly does smack of regime change. And we all have seen where that goes, and the answer is effing nowhere. Right. Amy, what do you think?
I mean, by all accounts, it sounds like we have every single right to be able to intervene. When you're talking about two of our biggest superpowers or adversaries who, could potentially be working against us. But, one thing that I have really done a crash course on, particularly, when we were discussing the motive behind the, our conflict with Iran, and whether that was legitimate, whether it was a regime change, I've done my fair share of studying of history. And one thing that I've noticed is that usually when they are going for a regime change, they're pretty good at making it look like it's for very, very legitimate reasons. And in fact, oftentimes it is for very, very legitimate reasons. But does that justify us interfering so far as literally installing another government just so that we can have some type of financial benefit?
This is not the first time, though, right?
Yeah,
so how did that work out in Syria? How did that work in Iraq? How did that work in Iran? How did that work in Afghanistan?
Not great.
Not great.
Right. I completely agree with
just
the
want
fact
to see
that
one time.
Regime changes are a terrible idea. In fact, this is one of my favorite books, and it's all about all the clusterfucks that we got into by
It's a great book.
Exactly, change regimes. Read it. It's just basically the CIA is a complete clusterfuck. They create more problems than they actually solve.
Thank you so much for watching Her Take. If you like the show, can you help us out by subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification button, sharing, commenting, joining the conversation? It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. We appreciate you.